welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I'm still talking about the Dominaria United spoilers here. I think we're reaching the end now. This might be the last video I make like this, for this set anyway. There are a lot of legendary creatures to talk about that I haven't talked about, okay? I have sort of looked at a bunch of them. There are a whole lot that I'm not necessarily going to cover, maybe in any video, because they're very minimal. You know, this is obviously got a ton of legendary creatures in it, and a lot of them are, you know, they're uncommons. They're sort of just very minimal in what they're doing. There are a lot of commanders that really, there's not much to say because it's very obvious what's going on and what they're doing. 5 new commanders that we've never seen before that I'm going to talk about here today, and I'm going to start out with Shannon Sleeper's Scourge. And again, these are 5 commanders that I'm pretty sure we've never ever seen these actual characters in the game before. So 1 red, white, black, human knight, 2/4 with menace. Other legendary creatures you control have menace, and of course there's a huge legendary theme in here. So we have another legendary commander that wants you to be playing legendary creatures, obviously. Whenever you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, you draw a card and you lose a life. Wow. Okay, that's pretty good. The legendary land thing especially. Man. There's a lot of legendary lands out there, and it would be very easy for you to, you know, because you're in 3 colors, it would be a little more difficult, but you could fill your deck pretty full with only legendary lands. Now there's not really, Jesus, are there any legendary lands that add more than 1 color of mana? Almost all legendary lands are going to be either colorless, adding colorless mana, or 1 color of mana. So it is going to be a little difficult to completely fill your deck with legendary lands. That's obviously going to be a great include here, though, because just playing a land, I get to draw a card. That's fantastic. Whenever you cast a legendary spell as well. So huge advantage there for, you know, this might be one of those. Again, this kind of feels like a strict upgrade to maybe some commanders that we've already had in the format, where if you're playing that other one, now it's like, okay, well, I can just swap this out and possibly even add a color, right? So again, I'm not a ton to say here. You're in Legendary Tribal. This is a great commander if you want to be doing that. No question about it. All right, moving on. Vaakwarped Singir. 1, a white and a black vampire 2/2, flying death touch lifelink. I already like it. Having a commander with flying death touch and lifelink is fantastic. You know, I say this about Atraxa. One of the reasons Atraxa makes a fantastic Super Friends commander isn't just because of the proliferate, but because your commander has flying and death touch and vigilance and lifelink, which means it makes for a fantastic blocker and people don't want to attack into you. If your commander has flying and death touch, that means it just sits there, assuming you don't want to attack with it, which you probably don't. It just sits there and it's a fantastic blocker, and people don't want to attack into you because they're going to lose their creature likely, right? So that's already great. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if life was paid to activate it, you may pay that much life again. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new text for the copy. Wow. Okay, so we're in Orzhov, which of course is the perfect colors for this kind of thing. I just did Tavash Gloom Summoner on my Underwhelming Commanders video, and I was talking about how if that guy had been white and black, he would have been way more popular, because you're in the life gain, life paying scenario there, but you're only in mono black. If that guy had been Orzhov, he'd be way more popular because you have access to so much more stuff that work in that theme, and that would be the case here. So whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, obviously, if life was paid to activate it, okay, so that's a whole lot. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is a fetch land, right? Marsh Flats. So let's play Marsh Flats into this scenario. I'm going to activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, right? Marsh Flats is not a mana ability. If life was paid to activate it, which it is, you have to pay 1 life for your fetch lands. You may pay that much life again if you do copy. That's really good, right? So just a Marsh Flats in here, right? So now you're going to be looking for stuff where you want to pay life, obviously. So I pay 1 life with my Marsh Flats, I sacrifice it, and then I pay 1 more life, and I go get another land. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty fantastic. Yeah. Very open-ended. There's a lot you can do there. Now you have to be careful here, of course, because this is activate an ability, right? You got to have that colon in there, right? So anything where you're paying life, and again, if you're thinking of building this deck and you're not exactly sure, you have the colon. Anything before the colon has to say pay life, right? If you're paying life before the colon, that is paying life to activate an ability. There can be a lot of other stuff as well, right? It doesn't have to be just paying life. It can be mana and pay life, right? So greed, for example, right? Greed is, you pay the mana and you pay some life. I think it's 2 life, right? Colon, draw a card. So that is, you're paying life to activate an ability. You're also paying mana, but this doesn't say you can't do that. This only says if life was paid to activate the ability, and on greed, that is the case. So now I can pay the mana, pay the life, draw a card, and then pay 2 more life to draw another card, right? So obviously there's going to be an absolute ton of stuff here. You just have to make sure it's not a mana ability, and you have to make sure it's an activated ability, right? You are paying life to activate the ability. So again, you want to see pay life and then a colon and then whatever comes after, and you're going to copy it. So there's going to be a ton of options here for this guy, no question. This is going to be a popular one, I think. Next up, we have the Lady of Otaria. 3 red, green, avatar. 5/5. You may tap 3 untapped dwarves you control rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Wow, that's neat. So we're in Dwarf Tribal. We're in Gruul Dwarf Tribal. And I don't know how many green dwarves there are. I mean, there might be some in this set. Typically, they're only red. There's a little bit of black in there. There's a little bit of white, of course, because you have Depala, which is I guess, I mean, you have, of course, Depala is the Boros sort of dwarf vehicle commander, and then you have Magda, which is obviously going to go in this deck. How good is Magda in this deck, right? Because you're tapping your dwarves. So Magda would be your mono red option for a dwarf commander. There hasn't been anything in green, and of course there's nothing in Gruul. I don't know if there's any green dwarfs at all. I'll look it up for you guys. So you may tap 3 untapped dwarves you control rather than pay the spell's mana cost. So tap 3 dwarves and you pay it and you cast it for free. That's pretty great. What else is it doing though? At the beginning of each end step, right? And we like those end step triggers on our commanders. If a land you control was put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, so now we're doing lands. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put any number of dwarf cards from them into your hand. Put the rest on the... Wow, this is a weird mix of land theme and dwarves. Thematically, I like it because dwarves do a lot of mining, right? They're always doing mountain stuff and mining and all that. We definitely have never seen this mix. This is a really odd mix of stuff going on here. Again, just that green dwarves is kind of a weird one, but lands as well. So you want a land you control to be put into a graveyard from the battlefield. That's obviously very easy. Again, fetch lands. I just crack an Evolving Wilds. Now I've had a land go to the graveyard this turn, and on my end step, I reveal the top 4 cards of my library, put any number of dwarf cards from among them into your hand. So pretty good value there. The question is, you know, I hate cards where you can whiff. That feels so bad. And again, getting a land into your graveyard from the battlefield has to be from the battlefield. Doing that every turn might not be super easy. I mean, obviously you can just sacrifice your lands. You probably want to sacrifice your lands to get some effect. I don't know how many, like fetch lands is going to be your best option here because they replace themselves, so you're not down a land. How many fetch lands can you fit in here? Obviously you have, you know, your Wooded Foothills, you know, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse. I don't know how many you actually have to choose from. You can just sacrifice your lands, but I don't know how often you're going to be wanting to do that. And if you sacrifice your lands and then at the beginning of your end step you get that trigger and you reveal 4 cards and there's no dwarves, that feels awful. We can do the changeling thing here though, right? And again, as I already talked about with another commander, Roga doesn't have to be a creature. This is a dwarf card, right? And I talked about this in my other rules video about how when it says card, that's all it cares about. All it cares about is card. It doesn't have to be a creature. So a dwarf card means any change, like a Taurine Mauler, that's a dwarf card, right? So you are, I don't know how limited you're going to be on the amount of dwarfs you can put in here. Again, I don't know if there's any green ones at all, but changelings will work. So I can put a Masked Vandal in here, right? There's a green dwarf, right? I can put a Masked Vandal in here, reveal the top 4 cards of my, because I don't want to whiff, right? And if you are, even if we're just talking about creatures, like for me, a creature deck has at least 30 creatures in it. At least 30 creatures in it. If I'm in a creature heavy deck, which this is going to be 34, 35, I might go as high as 40 here, creatures in this deck, and they would all have to be dwarves. So again, either actual dwarves or changelings. And again, they don't have to actually be a changeling creature. It can just be a changeling spell, just to guarantee. Again, I don't want to miss. I don't want to whiff. That sucks. I cracked out Evolving Wilds and then I whiff on my end step. It's like, oh, well, that was all for nothing, right? Because that's what, other than I just cast my commander for free, you want to actually get something out of it, right? And refilling your hand all the time. I mean, if you can get like 2 dwarves off the top, that's great. Obviously, you can stack the top of your library as well. So there's that. You definitely want to be doing that. You can just Worldly Tutor. I'd put a dwarf on top of my library to guarantee I get a dwarf in my hand. Or there's many other things that put creatures to the top of the library, which you probably want to look into that as well. Interesting. I don't think this is going to be a super popular one. It's a little, like I said, the Gruul Dwarves is already out of the norm. And then you're doing the land thing as well. So you're definitely not, you're not in what you would typically see here. But for me, I like stuff like that. Next up, another Gruul commander, Rulik Mons Warren Chief. 1 red, green Goblin. Has a menace. It's a 3/3. And when Rulik Mons Warren Chief, I mean, is this going to have something to do with goblins, I wonder? It's rare that you see a goblin commander that is not doing some sort of goblin tribal. But again, it's in Gruul. That is rare. When Rulik Mons Warren Chief attacks, okay, so we have an attack trigger. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tap. If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1. There it is. Red goblin creature token. I mean, he's sitting in a throne, so you have to think that he's making goblin tokens, right? He doesn't have haste, and like I said, you see haste a lot on commanders that have attack triggers. He does have menace, which means you can attack with him without sort of like he's only a 3/3, right? And he has an attack trigger, so you want to be attacking with him every turn. Menace means I can attack any opponent that only has 1 creature, and I'll be fine, which is good. Still not great though, right? Again, I want to throw like a power matrix in here to give my commander flying, so I don't have to worry about it getting. Now it has flying and menace, and like now there's no way it's going to get blocked unless all my opponents are playing Angel Tribal, right? So I'm good. I look at the top card of my library, so it's only the top card, and again, we don't want to whiff here. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield tap. There is no whiffing in this scenario, so that's a good thing. If it's a land, you put it onto the battlefield. If it's not a land, right? If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, so in other words, if it's not a land, you get a goblin token, so you get something no matter what. So every time your commander attacks, you get something, which is really nice. You either get the land or you get the goblin token. It's really interesting. Like I'm thinking of a lot of other Gruul commanders that, like, you have the Rada, which is the Gruul lands commander, which I think fits in this deck, and this fits in that deck, right? Because you're looking at the top card of your library. They fit in each other's deck. You have Hans Eriksson, which is a Gruul commander, which is looking at the top card of their library. So that they fit in each other's decks as well. I think both of those, Rada and Hans, both would go in this deck because you're doing the top decking thing. You're looking at the top card of your library all the time. I mean, Rada is fantastic just because you want to know what's on top of your library, right? You can put Augur of Autumn in here. If I'm playing a deck like this, I want to know what I'm going to get. I don't want to be guessing. So I look at the top card of my library and I know whether I'm going to be getting a land and I know whether I'm going to be getting a goblin token. The land thing is, you know, I mean, you're going to be getting more landfall triggers than you normally would by, obviously, you play your land for turn, and then if you put a land into play, it's a landfall trigger. So you can do that. You can do some landfall stuff here. You're also creating goblin tokens, so you can also do obviously the goblin token thing, right? Can do the goblin tribal in here as well. So again, you could go either way or both. I would do both. I would do a little bit of top deck manipulation things. Yeah, like if you look at the top card of your library and it's not a land, you're just going to put it back on top of your library, right? Because you're just looking at it. So again, just like with Rada, and when you look at Rada, you think, oh, that's a lands thing. I like that you can look at the top card of your library all the time, so you know what's on top of your library, right? So this is a commander where you're going to know what's on top of your library. It's almost like having a Sensei's Divining Top because you almost always know what's on top of your library because you're always looking at it. So this might be a good deck for impromptu raid and stuff like that, right? Cards where if I know what's on top of my library, then I get to use, you know, some, like I know what's on top. Aid from the Cowl, right, is another great one. I know I have a big creature on top of my library because I just looked at it and put it back, and away I go, right? You know, crack that fetch land again to get Revolt so you can put it into play. I would be doing that as well. I would be doing, okay, maybe I'm doing a little bit of a land theme. Not a lot though. I wouldn't go heavy on the land theme, but you can do the Goblin tribal thing a little bit, and of course there's a ton of support there. And also the I know what's on top of my library all the time, and there's lots of advantages there as well, right? So I like it. It's very interesting. There's a lot you can do there, I think. Anyway, moving on. All right, and lastly today we got Najal the Storm Runner. 2 blue red Efreet Wizard. 5/4. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Yeah, great. When Najal the Storm Runner attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. You're obviously in an instant sorcery theme, which of course in Izzet colors we have a bazillion commanders that are already doing that. This guy probably goes in all those decks. He goes in the Niv Mizzet deck and the Veyran decks and all that, I would imagine. Sure. And obviously there's a lot of, again, you can swap out. Maybe you already have an Izzet sorcery, instant sorcery theme, and you just want to try a new commander. You are copying, so the copy thing, there is some support there. Twinning Staff, for example, because you're guaranteed doing the copying thing. You would want something like that in here. You want to attack with your commander though, and again, now we have a commander that when it attacks, you get this trigger. It's a 5/4. That's pretty big, but again, doesn't have flying, doesn't have evasion, doesn't have, so you're going to have to work around that a little. It is a bit of a workaround. But when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. Pretty good. Like, I would make it worth my while here. I'm going to attack with my commander. I pay 2. The next instant or sorcery spell I cast, so the one, and I guess since you can cast your sorceries at instant speed, you can just do it whenever. You can do it right away if you want, as soon as this ability resolves. So I'm going to make it worth it. I'm going to cast an expropriate or something. I mean, maybe not an expropriate, but something that it's going to, I'm not just going to cast a lightning bolt with this, right? Because it's like, I mean, you could, if you're sitting there and you have nothing really fantastic in your hand and you got the mana open, you can just copy the lightning bolt and kill 2 creatures or something, right? If you have the opportunity to attack with your commander, you don't want the ability to go to waste. But I definitely am going to have those big spells in my hand where when I cast them, I'm going to make it worth my while to copy it. The big draw spell or whatever, pay up 2 extra, and I get to draw a bunch more cards, all that good stuff. So other than that, though, you know, again, you're just an Izzet instant sorcery deck. You're just doing it a little bit different than all the others. And I would imagine most people would argue a lot worse than all the others. Like Niv Mizzet's way better than this guy. Veyran's way better than this guy, I would say. Just, you know, if you don't want to use the same old, this guy's another option. That's pretty much it. But yeah, that's it. That is all for today. 5 new interesting commanders. We got a ton. I don't even know how, like, again, this probably will be my last spoiler video. I'm going to have to start figuring out how I'm going to talk about the commanders from the set that I haven't actually talked about yet. I'd like to touch on all of them. There's a whole bunch that I don't even know if it's worth touching on. I might do a ranking video where I just rank all the commanders, but oh man, is that going to be a lot of work, because there's going to be like 50. I might just do a top 20 or something. It's going to be tough. Sometimes when you have this many commanders, it's tough to evaluate, you know, how much of it is I'm just going to pick the commanders that I like. I don't want to really do that. The ones that are just, like, I usually go for the ones that are interesting build arounds and all that kind of stuff. When I rank the commanders like I did with Neon Dynasty, I did what I thought would be the most popular ones, because that is sometimes a little harder or a little easier to evaluate which ones are going to be popular, right? So I might do that, but there's so many commanders. Ooh boy, I would just have to just rip through them. Like, here's this one, next, you know. But anyway, tell me what you guys think of these new commanders in the comments below. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.